Hello, this is a talk on Chapter 17 in Stephen Lucas, The Methods of Persuasion. So when we look at the different ways we can persuade within those different organizational patterns we looked at in Chapter 16, there's a few tools that we have at our disposal. Number one is building credibility. Aristotle calls that ethos. Using evidence, right, to make logic appeals by reasoning, appealing to the emotions, that's called pathos. What is credibility? This is the perception of the speaker's competence and their character. And this is Aristotle's name for credibility, E-T-H-O-S, ethos. And we see this in words like ethics, chapter 2. So what are the different types of credibility you can have? Initial, the credibility you have before the speech. So I've encouraged a lot of you to stick with the same source topics with your persuasive speeches that you did for the informative. And that way you do have some initial credibility because the audience knows that you've spoken on that topic before. We also have derived credibility. This is produced during the speech, and this mostly comes through your oral citations, right, showing competency in your research, and also by mentioning your own experiences with the topic at hand. And then lastly, we have terminal. This is the overall credibility that you have at the end of your speech. How successful were you? How believable were you in delivering this speech? So how do we enhance it? By explaining our competency with the subject. Establishing common ground. This is something new. And what we're doing in establishing common ground is we're basically conveying to our audience, I am just like you in some key ways. We have a common experience on which to build. And speaking expressively and with conviction. With persuasion, it can be absolutely deadly to sound apathetic, to sound like you don't care about your topic. Because if the audience can perceive that you aren't really energized and engaged or genuinely concerned with your topic, they'll know implicitly that they have no reason to feel differently than you do, the speaker.
As we all know, there are many differences amongst the people in this class. But we do have one thing in common. We're all concerned about the quality of the education at this school. And that quality is clearly in danger because of the economic crisis. Budgets are shrinking, student services are disappearing, and we're being crowded out of classes we need to take. Now, there are no easy answers, but one thing that would help solve the problem is an increase in tuition. I don't like it any more than you do, but sometimes you must do what is necessary to maintain the quality of your education.
Okay, so clearly if he's arguing for an increase in tuition, obviously this is going to be a tough fight in terms of persuading the audience to come around to his point of view. But notice how he does set off by saying, look, I'm a student, right? I know this isn't popular, but this is nonetheless something we have to do. So I think making some appeal to his role as a student, just like his audience members, is something that's really going to help him and maintain credibility. Let's talk logos. This is Aristotle's name for logical appeals. And we use evidence, and we combine evidence in patterns called reasoning to help the audience make sense of the evidence. These are the supporting materials used to prove or disprove something. And there's some tips with this speech in that the evidence has to have some qualities that it did not have with the informative speech. So first, the evidence needs to be specific to what we're trying to prove. It needs to be somewhat novel, something that the audience perhaps has not heard before. It has to be credible. So it has to be orally cited from a reputable outside source, and it needs to make a clear point of what you are trying to prove. So the evidence has to meet at least one of those criteria if it's going to be effective, because this time you want something from your audience. They're either going to passively agree with your proposal or they're going to take an action. And if you're asking something real of them, then it makes sense that the quality of the evidence has to go up as well. So how do we use evidence?
According to the Governor's Highway Safety Association, last year there were more than 5,000 motorcycle deaths in the United States. That's a jump of 9% from the previous year. If 5,000 people dead doesn't seem like a lot, consider this. Over the past 15 years, motorcycle deaths doubled, while automobile deaths dropped by 23%. Here in Wisconsin alone, 114 people died last year. That's a 34% increase from the year before. Clearly, we're not doing enough to curb the problem. But here in Wisconsin, there's an easy solution. We can save lives simply by requiring that all motorcyclists wear a helmet.
Okay, good. So this speech used statistics, and notice how he kept saying in Wisconsin. Well, this speech was actually recorded at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, right? So you have evidence that is narrowed somewhat and specific to what he's talking about and relevant because it pertains to where they're all living. Let's talk about reasoning. This is drawing conclusions based upon the evidence. And perhaps I spoke prematurely. I inserted a break slide. So when we come back from the end of this video, I encourage you to take a small break. We will talk about the different types of logos or reasoned appeals. Thanks for watching.